So in this video, what I want to show you is how we can control other devices such as synthesizers through MIDI capabilities that the Digitakt holds within. So as we know from the previous videos, we have 8 sampling tracks and then we have 8 MIDI tracks. Now these 8 MIDI tracks can control different devices on each track. So to get to them, all we do is click on track number 9, which is MIDI A or MIDI track A. And what we're presented on this page is 8 banks of different parameters. So if I just quickly run through what each one of these means. The channel, this sets the MIDI channel of the track's MIDI data to. If you set this parameter off, it turns the MIDI track off. Please note that this parameter cannot be parameter locked. So it's either on or off, and plus you choose a channel. So to activate a channel on this page, all we do is press function and then push the encoder down. That activates that channel where you can select 1 to 16. So it's either 1 to 16 or it's off. The bank, this sends a bank change message on CC0 MSB and it's off to 1 to 8. So the subbank sends a subbank charge message on CC32 LSB. Program, this program change sends a program change message, that's 0 to 1 to 8, or off and then 1 to 1 to 8. PB, this is the pitch bend of if you wanted to use pitch bend on your device. AT means after touch control if you want to use that on your device. MW means the mod wheel on the device, and BC means breath controller if you want to use that, if it has that on your device. So what we're going to do is we're going to activate this now and we're going to get some sounds out of this. My wiring connections up before we dive into it is I've got a MIDI cable coming out of it. It goes all the way around into the input of the Minitar MIDI in. So MIDI out on the Digitakt to the MIDI in of the Minitar. I've then got my audio out coming from the Minitar and it goes all the way around to input L. So that is how we're going to be listening to sound through the Digitakt as well. So what it's going to be doing is sending MIDI data through the MIDI out. It's going to be doing whatever it's doing in here, and then the audio that it's activating from the MIDI is going to come back out through the output, and then it's come back into the L of the input. What I want to do is just to activate this channel, and then I'm going to go into the chromatic mode. So if I hold function and track, we're now on the MIDI track, but we're in the chromatic mode of the keyboard. So this is basically its keyboard starting at C. And as you'll notice, nothing, we can't hear alt yet, which is all right. But if you look here in the top left corner of the Minitar, we can see that we're getting signal coming in. So that's a good sign. If, depending on what software or what hardware you've got, you might just need to check which channel is programmed into this, because this channel might be on channel 6. So if you just keep clicking that and then move to different channels, then you should see what is what. But in this case, it doesn't matter for us because we're getting signal on all these channels. Once we've got that set up, we can see that we're getting MIDI information coming through. What we want to do now is to hear it. So what we do is we go to our mixer page. So if we go on function and then master, we're on our external mixer page, which is page 3 of 3. So if you're on the compressor page, for example, all you've got to do is press this another 2 times and then you're on your 3rd page. You'll notice on this screen we've got in left, in right, pan left, pan right, and then we've got 2 delay sends and then 2 reverb sends, one for the left channel, one for the right channel, and vice versa. If we had a stereo input coming in, we could basically turn this dual off, and this would be a stereo input now where we can control this basically on 1 fader instead of 2. But we want to keep it, because it's a mono device and a mono bass, we basically want the left input only. So all we've got to do is turn up this left input. I'm just going to put it at 100 so that we've got a bit of headroom, and I've just turned down the output of the Minitar. So if we go back to our page, we should now hear sound. And we do, which is good. So what I want to do now is, because this is quite high up, because that's quite high up in pitch, I'm going to go back onto my first trigger page and I'm going to select my main starting note. So you'll see here it's C5, so this is playing a C5 as its starting point. I want to bring that down 2 octaves, so we'll go C3. And now the bass note of this is starting at C3. Not on the chromatic mode, on the actual MIDI note itself. To do that in the chromatic mode, we just lower down the octave by 3 or 2. So if we're playing a note in 1 by 1, so say we're on a step sequencer and we play this sort of pattern in, then it is playing at the C3 value. If we wanted to change that, let's say we just do that same pattern again, and we wanted to change a value, we just hold that, press that button down, and then we can change it to maybe an A, and then maybe a G, and then we can do it that way. So going back to the chromatic mode, we can also control functions within the external hardware synth via MIDI as well. So on this example, I'll just show you pitch bend. So if pitch bends, we've got this. So that's an automatic setup. Again, all I'm doing is holding function and pushing down on the button. If we've got a mod wheel present and that's assigned to something, which it's not on this occasion, but that is where you control your mod wheel, so them two are controllable, along with your aftertouch and your breath control. If we move on to the next page, which is the CC value, this is in like correlation with this page. So the CC value on this top left hand corner, say for example this one, if we activate it by pressing the function and that button, and we have a look inside the manual of the Minotaur and say we want to control the cutoff via this macro, what we have to do is set it the value of what the cutoff is. So in this occasion, the Minotaur's frequency value is 19. So if we go over to the amp page, this is where we can select our CC values. So on the amp page, if we go to whatever parameter it is, so for example the frequency is set to 19, so if I just type in 19 on this, which is that one, we'll see now we can control that value via our Digitakt unit. So this could be somewhere in your studio. As long as you've got it set up to MIDI, you can assign this to MIDI. The only thing is, if you have another device set up, this is when you'd want to start giving them different channels so that they're not all playing the same thing at once. So for example, if we went on to bank B, and we would select this to be channel 2, this could be controlling another synthesizer, and then this messaging that was going out would be separate to what this is controlling. So another example would be if I wanted to control the resonance. So the resonance number in the Minotaur's manual, this resonance number is assigned to number 21. So if I just bring this down to number 21, so we've assigned that to number 21. To double check what the numbers are, we can just press and hold this button, and then what that does is it shows us the actual numbers that we've assigned. So this one is number 19, this one's 21. And then what we want to do is go back to the filter page, or this is the CC value, and then we want to activate this button. Now this will be controlling the resonance. a really powerful tool to use. It's a shame you only get one LFO per MIDI track. It'd be nice to have two. You could really do some really fun stuff with that. But that is the basics in how you get your MIDI out of the Digitakt, using the Digitakt's functions and its step sequencer and whatnot to control outboard gear and to bring it back in. If you're wanting to dive more into the MIDI configuration of the Digitakt, all we do is go into the settings page, head down to MIDI Config, and then in here we have a different array of settings and selections we can do. Depending on your setup, I can't really tell you what to do with this, other than the sync is where you can send or receive clock signals, transport signals, and program channel data you can send and receive. Port configuration, this is where you basically configure your MIDI information. You can set it up to send DIN24 pulses or DIN48 pulses or MIDI information. Bearing in mind DIN24 and DIN48, no MIDI information is sent when it's on the modes. If we go down to the input from and output to, we can basically look at this. So the MIDI in, which would be on this channel, we could set that to basically be MIDI or USB or both. So when in MIDI mode, for example, the USB information, MIDI data coming in from the USB will be rejected, and vice versa. If we use it on the USB, the MIDI data will be rejected. But if we have it on both, we've got both of them coming in, so it'll accept both MIDI information on both of them. Exactly the same with the outputs. So if we just have a look in the ports tab, and I'll just go quickly through what each one of these means. The turbo speed, this starts turbo speed negotiation. The speed is chosen automatically. You need to use a MIDI interface that supports turbo MIDI protocol. The output functionality, this selects what type of signals the MIDI output will send, or the MIDI port will send. So you can have MIDI, DIN24 or DIN48. So DIN48 and DIN24 are sync pulses. No MIDI data is transferred over the port when these options are selected. Exactly the same for the Thru port. So the Thru port is basically, this allows the same functionality as the output functionality, but it's just another output basically. It's a Thru port. The input from source, this will select where the MIDI data is being received from, so you can have that as disabled. This will make Digitakt disregard any incoming data. MIDI, this will make Digitakt listen only to MIDI data that is sent into the MIDI in. USB, this will make Digitakt only listen to MIDI data that is sent to the USB port. And MIDI plus USB, this will only allow Digitakt to listen to MIDI data sent to both MIDI in and the USB port. Exactly the same for the output, but just on the output, so we have disabled MIDI, USB and MIDI and USB. The output channel, this selects whether the knobs will send data on the auto channel or the track channel. Param out, this selects what type of MIDI information messages the data entry knobs will send. So we have CC, values or NRPN. The encoder destination, this controls the data entry and level data knobs sends MIDI data or not. When set to INT or INT, the knobs only affect the Digitakt and no MIDI data is sent. When sent to INT plus external, the knobs are affected Digitakt and also sends MIDI data to the external devices. When set to INT plus EXT, the knobs affects the Digitakt and also sends MIDI data to external devices. Trig key destination controls whether the Trig key sends MIDI data or not. When set to INT, the trigger keys affects the Digitakt and no MIDI data is sent. When set to INT EXT, the Trig keys affects the Digitakt and also sends MIDI data to external devices. When set to EXT, the Trig keys does not affect the Digitakt, but MIDI data is sent externally. And that goes for the mute destination as well. So the mute destination controls whether activating or deactivating mutes will send the MIDI data out or not. So this is exactly the same as this one in terms of its functionality. And then we have receive notes and receive CC or NRPN notes. Receive notes will, when active, make it possible to play Digitakt using an external MIDI keyboard, and receive CC/NRPN, when activated, will make it possible to control Digitakt's parameters from an external MIDI device sending CC/NRPN data. So if we move on to the channels page, this is where you can change or dictate what MIDI information the Digitakt holds. So for example, track 1 is channel 1 on this device, track 2 is 2, 3, 4, and it goes up to number 8. We can have track A, which is your MIDI track, but usually we use these for outputs. This is why they're all off, but we could have them on if we wanted to. We just assign them a track number, so it's going to be 1 to 16. If we go further down, the effects control channel, this selects the dedicated MIDI channel that is associated with the parameters on the delay and reverb parameters page, both for input and output. If configured as off, parameter data is neither sent nor received via the MIDI. The auto channel selects the MIDI channel that will give access to the current active track. If an external MIDI keyboard connected to Digitakt sends MIDI data on this channel, the keyboard will control the active track. This can be useful for if you wanting to quickly change between active audio tracks and play a different sound. The Digitakt also uses auto channel to record the MIDI tracks from the external MIDI controllers. The program change in channel selects the MIDI channel that will listen for incoming program change messages. An auto setting will use the auto channel, enable Digitakt to respond to program changes messages within the MIDI sync menu. The program change out channel selects the MIDI channel that will send program change messages when changing patterns. An auto setting will use the auto channel, enable Digitakt to send program change messages in the sync menu. So that's the basics into knowing how to send the MIDI data out from the Digitakt to an external synth such as the Minitar. We can control it via an LFO, which can control a parameter within the Minitar. All we have to do is get the CC information for our device, go into our filter CC selection page, assign one of these encoders to whatever value it is. So for our example, the filter cutoff is number 19. We then go back onto our filter page, and this is the CC value for that CC number. So from this we can control the cutoff frequency via this. We can then assign this to an LFO, and this LFO can then basically do the work for us. So instead of us, if I just reset that, so instead of us going like this, we could basically set up a waveform that does it for us. So in this one, for example, I've set this mode to re-trigger. So every time a trigger happens, it's going to start doing this waveform and it's going to ramp up, and that's how we're getting that opening of the filter per time. So if we just listen to that, control that by the depth of how far it goes, and then from that we can sculpt our sound and bring some drums in. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.